Good afternoon. We are beginning. Senator Fisher is on her way. As you probably all know, there's a vote taking place on the floor, and she will be here momentarily. Good afternoon. The subcommittee will come to order. I'd like to welcome everyone to the first of our fiscal year 2025 budget hearings for the Legislative Branch Appropriations Subcommittee. I would also like to welcome Ranking Member Fisher when she arrives, with whom I work very closely with. She's an extraordinary partner in our efforts. I'm looking forward to continuing our work together and with other members of this committee. Today we have with us the Government Accountability Office Comptroller General Jean Dodaro, Government Publishing Office Director Hugh Halpern, and Congressional Budget Office Director Phillip Swagel. I would like to thank you for joining us here today to testify on your agency's 2025 budget. I ask unanimous consent that the witnesses' written statements be placed in the hearing record. Let me begin by again thanking the women and men of your agencies who work every day to facilitate the work of the Senate and the Congress. Without each of them, the Senate would not be able to perform its constitutional responsibilities on behalf of the American people. The legislative branch agencies have submitted fiscal year 2025 budget requests that account for a $544 million increase over the fiscal year 2024 legislative branch enacted appropriation. While we do not yet have subcommittee allocations, the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2023 enacted strict levels for appropriations again in fiscal year 2025. As such, we will be making very difficult decisions for the allocation of resources provided to the legislative branch in fiscal year 2025. It will then fall upon the heads of each legislative branch agency to utilize those resources to meet their respective missions while addressing the needs of their workforce. This will not be an easy fiscal year, but I am confident that the legislative branch can meet this challenge. For fiscal year 2025, the GAO is requesting $915.9 million in appropriated funds, which is an increase of $104 million over the first fiscal year 2024 enacted level. This request would support a funded staffing level of 3,600 positions to fill critical skill gaps and fulfill GAO's mission to support Congress. It is important to note that the return on investment over the past 5 years is $113 for each $1 spent on GAO. The agency's request continues the work of GAO's Science, Technology, Assessment, and Analytics team, which provides Congress with critical foresight and oversight of science and technology issues in a rapidly changing world. In fiscal year 2025, this includes ongoing and future work in aspects of artificial intelligence in both defense and civilian applications, regenerative medicine, medical research, and many other critical areas. The requested increase also prioritizes reporting on government-wide cybersecurity capabilities. This will continue GAO's assessment of multiple cybersecurity priorities, such as the development and execution of a comprehensive national cybersecurity strategy, the cybersecurity of critical infrastructure, and the security of federal information systems. The GAO performs critical work on behalf of the Senate, and I look forward to hearing from Comptroller General Dodaro on his agency's work. Today, we will also be reviewing the Government Publishing Office's request. The GPO is seeking an appropriation of $136 million in fiscal year 2025, which is an increase of $4 million over the fiscal year 2024 enacted level. The request for the Congressional Publishing account remains at the fiscal year 2024 enacted level of $83 million. The agency is requesting an increase of nearly $4.3 million for the public information programs of the Superintendent of Documents account to meet mandatory pay, price level increases, and the cost of digitizing printed materials for easier access by the public. Additionally, the agency is requesting funding to support the continued development and operations of the GovInfo and XPub systems. The work that the agency performs on a daily basis for the Senate is critical, And again, I look forward to the director's testimony. And we'll also hear from the Congressional Budget Office. The CBO plays an important nonpartisan role as it strives to provide clear and objective, timely analysis and reporting on budgetary and economic information for the Congress. The agency is requesting $73.5 million in fiscal year 2025, which is an increase of $3.5 million over fiscal year 2024 enacted levels. This increase provides for the salary and benefits of the agency's workforce and to fund a slight increase in staff to continue to improve the responsiveness of the agency to the Congress so that legislative work can be informed by the important information provided by the CBO. Director Swagel and I have discussed the agency's efforts to provide timely responses to congressional requests and other important work the CBO is conducting to meet its mission. I look forward to hearing from Director Swagel about the CBO's work. With this said, the goal of the Senate Appropriations Committee is to continue the normal order for appropriations bills. As such, this subcommittee will be aggressively working to produce a thoughtfully crafted bill that can be considered by the full committee and the Senate in the coming months. I look forward to the testimony of our witnesses and to working with Senator Fisher, who, with precise timing, has arrived, so I may recognize her. Again, completely dependable and thoroughly in tune with the tempo of the United States Senate. Senator, I will recognize you for your comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The chairman voted quicker than I did. He scurried down there and got there ahead of me. But thank you all. I appreciate you being here today, and I look forward to working with Chairman Reed on the ability to craft a fiscally responsible bill that will meet the needs of Congress and our support agencies this year. I thank our three witnesses for appearing before the subcommittee today and for your testimony. Before I discuss the specific details of your budget request, I want to build upon Chairman Reed's comments regarding this upcoming fiscal year. In fiscal year 2024, the legislative branch's allocation was an over 2% cut from the enacted funding level. Under the terms of the Fiscal Responsibility Act, another reduction for our bill is possible this year. As we face an uncertain fiscal year and the potential of further cuts, legislative branch agencies, well, you need to be judicious stewards of the resources. After years of significant spending increases, the federal government as a whole must now exercise more fiscal restraint. The legislative branch will be no exception to that rule. Mr. Dodaro, the Government Accountability Office holds an important role in providing oversight of government spending and preventing waste in federal programs. For fiscal year 2025, the GAO seeks an increase of $104 million in appropriated funding. This is a substantial request. I'd like to hear from you what is driving that need and how you plan to maintain current services in this difficult fiscal year. Dr. Swagel, the Government Budget Office's fiscal year 2025 request focuses on personnel costs and sustaining current IT capacity. In your testimony, I hope to hear how CBO is managing personnel-related costs and how your agency is working to improve CBO's forecasting accuracy and transparency. Mr. Halpern, the Government Publishing Office's request will support the continued transition to digital products and technologies. This will achieve savings while also increasing accessibility for the American public. I look forward to learning more about these efforts in your testimony. Again, thank you to our witnesses for being here today, and I hope to have a productive conversation on these budget proposals. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Fisher. I will now ask our witnesses, and we'll begin with Comptroller General Dodaro, then Director Halpern, then Director Swagel, to give brief opening statements, no more than 5 minutes. And you all should understand that your full text of your remarks is already in the record. Comptroller General. You're recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Ranking Member Senator Fisher, it's good to be with you this afternoon. Pleased to be here to talk about our FY 2025 budget request. First, I want to thank the subcommittee, both of you, for your support in the past. I believe we've returned a good return on investment as a result of your confidence in us. Last year, as a result of implementation of our recommendations, over $70 billion accrued to the federal government in financial benefits. Our return on investment over the last 6 years is $133 back for every dollar invested in GAO. So we're helping to make government more efficient and effective over that time. Demand for our services remains high. We do work for over 93% of the standing committees of the Congress. In addition to our support for the committees, we're also receiving more and more requests for technical assistance from individual member offices, particularly in the science and technology area and other areas. This year so far, for the first half of the year, we've fielded technical requests from over 215 members of Congress, offices, and their staff. And so I'm very pleased to be able to provide this service. I think it's important, too, as there's been quite a bit of turnover in the Congress, will be more so, and including the staff. So we're a reservoir of institutional knowledge that can provide help and support in helping the Congress carry out its responsibilities. Now, our request for 2025 basically would be able to maintain the staffing at GAO at what we're going to end this fiscal year with 2024. With Congress's support, we've built up our capacity, particularly at Congress's encouragement, in the science, technology, and analytics area and national security area. These are very important. In the national security area, this latest NDAA had 115 mandates for GAO studies. So we're looking at mission readiness issues, particularly given the competition with China and Russia. All the major weapon systems development, we're providing support to the Congress there, as well as modernization of the nuclear weapons complex. We're also tracking the funding to the Ukraine, both in terms of the military assistance as well as humanitarian assistance. In the science technology area, we're doing a lot of work on artificial intelligence. We have work underway in generative AI, both in terms of what's going on in the commercial sector, as well as the implications for both the workforce as well as the environment and other areas. Regenerative medicine. We have a lot of work in a number of different areas, both in the medical applications area, for example, antivirals to be prepared for future pandemics, as well as hypersonic weapons at DOD and other technical areas. We're doing work on the nuclear submarine, the Columbia-class submarine. Also on fraud. There's been epic fraud during the pandemic. We did our latest estimate between $233 and $521 billion was lost to fraud annually between 18 and 2022. And we've got a lot of efforts underway to help the government prevent fraud from occurring in the future. Healthcare is another area we're spending a lot of money on. 29% of federal program spending is in Medicare and Medicaid. Last year, however, there was over $100 billion reported in improper payments in Medicare and Medicaid. We've got a number of recommendations to bring that better under control. And also in cybersecurity. I'm particularly concerned that we do work in the critical infrastructure protections. A lot of concern now about China targeting our water systems, electricity grid systems. These areas, the federal government really doesn't have enough knowledge about the exact status of those areas because all the standards are voluntary for the private sector to implement. Lastly, I would just say that I want to always compliment the GAO workforce. They're dedicated, talented people. For the last 3 years running now, we've been designated the best place to work in government for mid-sized federal agencies. That helps us attract and retain the caliber of people we need to take on these difficult assignments from the Congress. So I'm very, very pleased, and I know you'll give careful consideration of our request, and I know there are difficult decisions ahead. So thank you for your attention. I'll be happy to answer your questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you very much, Comptroller. And now, Director Halpern, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Fisher. It is good to see you again. It's good that we got the band back together. I'm pleased to appear today to testify in favor of GPO's FY25 appropriations request. As you know, GPO is fundamentally a manufacturing operation. We publish, produce, and maintain materials for all three branches of government. And the way we operate is very much as a private sector business. Our 1,600 craftspeople and professionals produce virtually all of Congress's documents, along with numerous other publications, and we manufacture secure credential products like the U.S. passport and law enforcement credentials. We also provide digital information through our trusted digital repository, govinfo.gov, or by serving data to our partners like the Library of Congress, which uses that data on sites like congress.gov. Only about 10% of the agency's operating budget is directly appropriated, and most of that is to cover the cost of Congress's own printing and publishing needs, as well as our public information programs, including the Federal Depository Library Program. We recover the rest of our $1.3 billion operating budget directly from our customers. This year, we are requesting approximately $136 million, including $83 million for Congressional publishing, nearly $42 million for our public information programs, and about $11.4 million for special projects funded by our revolving fund. This represents about a 3.1% increase over last year and reflects the inflation in labor and materials over the past year. Fully funding our request will allow us to continue recruiting the next generation of GPO teammates and fund our ongoing modernization efforts, such as developing XPub, our next generation composition engine, and adopting digital printing technologies. Likewise, it will enable us to expand the depth and breadth of our digital offerings, like congressionally mandated reports and the Congressional serial set. Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Fisher, thank you for your past support of GPO. Supporting this committee and Congress as a whole is always one of our top priorities. I appreciate the opportunity to testify before the subcommittee today, and I look forward to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Director Halpern. Director Swagel, please.
Thank you, Chairman Reed and Ranking Member Fisher. Thank you for the opportunity to present the Congressional Budget Office's budget request. Let me start by thanking you for providing nearly the full amount we requested for the current fiscal year, and more broadly for your continued support of the agency. CBO is requesting an appropriation of $73.5 million for 2025. That's an increase of $3.5 million, or 5%, from the amount provided in 2024. That would address increased costs from inflation, it would sustain our investments in IT infrastructure, and enable CBO to expand our staff in key areas. The CBO's mission is to provide nonpartisan analysis to the Congress that's timely, rigorous, and transparent. My commitment is to get you the information you need when you need it. When legislation is heading to a vote, we provide cost estimates, real-time analysis of amendments, often hundreds or even thousands for the House NDAA, for example. We do analysis of large, complex legislation, such as the reauthorization of the Farm Bill that we're working hard on now. And we produce budget and economic projections that incorporate the effects of recent legislation and economic developments. We're working on our update of the 10-year budget right now for June release. There's continued strong interest in CBO's work from the congressional leadership, from committees, and from members. The additional resources we're requesting for this year would allow CBO to do even better in terms of our responsiveness and our transparency. The fiscal year 24 funding we received will permit us to grow from about 267 people, that was at the end of March, to 276 by the end of this year. Our request for 2025 would allow us to grow by an additional 9, so that's to 285. And I would say that staffing level would allow CBO to fulfill the agency's requirements under the Congressional Budget Act. In particular, CBO would add more analysts in areas of particular congressional focus. Defense and Homeland Security, right now we're advertising to hire 3 more people in those areas. Economic implications of fiscal policy, long-term projections, healthcare, including Medicare and Medicaid, and others, and Social Security. The requested increase is entirely for personnel expenses, and that's largely to cover the salaries and benefits for current employees, and then to a much lesser extent, to fund the new staff I mentioned. The non-personnel expenses will decline by about 3%, and that's because some of our spending for information technology in 2024 is for projects that we deferred over the last year or so, while operating under the continuing resolution, and those expenses will not recur next year. Let me just focus on the appropriations committees. So we will support the appropriators with real-time provision by provision estimates of the 12 annual appropriations bills, well, any supplemental appropriations bills should they come, and then any continuing resolutions. We will respond to thousands of requests for technical assistance and do cost estimates of amendments. And we're ready to do this for the appropriators this year, again, on the schedule that the appropriators want and getting you the information when you need it. In addition, we will provide hundreds of cost estimates for legislation that's required by statute, provide cost estimates before a floor vote for nearly all bills. We'll publish dozens of reports, both statutory reports and requested reports on a wide variety of topics. In summary, to achieve our goal of being as responsive as possible and as transparent as possible, CBO requests an increase of $3.5 million. With your support, we look forward to continuing to provide timely and high-quality analysis to the Congress. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much, Doctor. My first question for each of you, and if you could respond as briefly as you think possible, because we'll follow up and ask you for some written comments too. If the legislative branch fiscal year 2025 allocation requires your agency's budget to remain at the fiscal 2024 level, what are the impacts to your agency's ability to achieve its mission? And begin with Dr. Swagel and then down the line.
Yeah, thank you. Looking ahead, we will be prudent in our expansion. I mean, we're advertising for people, we will hire people, but I will make sure that we don't hire more than we can support at a CR level. We will hire in the key areas, in healthcare and national security, defense and veterans are the key things that we're advertising for now. So that will help improve our responsiveness. The additional people I would hope to hire with our FY25 request would let us do even more. So operating at the CR, I think we will do better than we did last year, but will still be areas where, I would say we'll have gaps and it will affect our responsiveness.
Thank you. Comptroller General.
Since over 80% of our costs are salaries and benefits, operating at CR level means a smaller GAO with less services to the Congress in meeting the demands and the priorities of the Congress. This would be especially true in areas Congress has specifically asked us to increase our capabilities. It would erode our capabilities in the science and technology area at a time when artificial intelligence is exploding all over the place. It would undermine our abilities in the national defense area to be able to have the full coverage of all the mandates in the NDAA. As I mentioned, there's 115 mandates, and we receive a lot of requests from chairs and ranking members in addition to those mandates in the Congress. It would impede our ability to deal with fraud prevention in federal government. I'm very concerned that the federal government's not anywhere near prepared and that this fraud has become more sophisticated and with organized crime involved both domestically and internationally. And would undermine our ability to deal with the cybersecurity area, and particularly in critical infrastructure protections, because that's why I think we're very vulnerable. I mean, we're obviously vulnerable in the federal systems, but I think we're vulnerable in weapons systems, and then critical infrastructure systems and our space programs. And so these are all critical, important areas. But since we're people, less resources, less people, less support for the Congress.
Thank you. Director Halpern, please.
Mr. Chairman, the short answer is, well, whatever level you're going to give us, we'll manage, because that's what we have to do. What we would ask is that if there are cuts necessary, that we have a discussion about which accounts they come out of. So the Appropriations Committee funds 3 accounts: Congressional printing, which we estimate the amount that Congress will need each year. So there's probably some play in that account. Similarly, the amounts that come out of our revolving fund are for special projects. And while those are important projects to the agency, if we have to defer them and slow our rollout of some of those projects, we can do that. Where we have a much tighter budget is in our public information programs, because that is a directly appropriated program. And we've asked for what we need, and should that account be cut, it would likely mean we would either be unable to backfill some of our librarian and other public information specialist roles, or that we wouldn't be able to meet the demand that we have on that front. So if overall you would need to trim our overall request, our request to you is that we have a discussion about where that comes from ahead of time so that we can best manage the impact on the agency.
Could you give us an example of your public information role, one of the programs you're...
Sure. The best recent example is Congress's mandate to make congressionally mandated reports available. So there are lots of exceptions to what goes online, but traditionally these were reports that were received by committees. They went into a filing cabinet, and then they went into an archive box. Now there's a process where we are working with the agencies as they deliver those reports to you to get them online. To date, we have, I think as of yesterday, about 331 congressionally mandated reports over this Congress and the prior Congress, and from about 60 some odd agencies. We're trying to expand that and build that. If we don't have the personnel to work on that mandate, that new mandate, that's going to slow down our ability to comply with Congress's mandate on that front.
Thank you. Comptroller Dodaro, you mentioned the mandates which you received from Congress, many of them which emanate from the Armed Services Committee, so I will have a discussion with my colleagues there. I'm being somewhat facetious. What is the impact on these mandates? I mean, does it prevent you from doing more valuable things, or is, just give me your sense, because I
think the mandates are good. They're good work. We have a dialogue all along. I mean, they're focused on the big investments that we're making in defense and in Department of Energy, particularly on the nuclear weapons modernization. So I think the mandates are good. And we've worked with the committee. In the new FAA reauthorization bill, there's 30 mandates for GAO. In the infrastructure bill, we're still working down 34 mandates for GAO. So it's not just armed services. About over half our work now is a result of mandates, but I think they're fine because we reach out early on when the bills are introduced. We have an ongoing dialogue. They're shaped appropriately. And I think at our request level, which I'm asking to basically stay even with our staffing, it's just the cost of personnel's gone up, with cost of living increases, healthcare benefits, et cetera. We can meet all the priorities of the Congress, but if we're operating at a continuing level from 24 to 25, there's probably in the order of 300 or 400 less people in GAO, and so we're not going to get to, like, if there's emerging issues that come up where there's another global crisis, where there's a domestic crisis, or we're expecting a big hurricane season this year, a more intense hurricane season. We're always involved in national disasters. We don't have flexibility. So it means that, you know, we're not going to get to everything that needs to be there. I feel like we've got a good relationship with the committees across the Congress to set priorities. If we have the resources, we'll meet them. If not, we're going to have to reprioritize and make tough decisions across all the committees.
Thank you very much. Senator Fisher, please.
Thank you, Chairman Reed. Mr. Dodaro, you were talking about the fraud prevention work that that you do, and you mentioned hiring new staff and having the resources of staff available to you to do that. But along with hiring new staff for those audits and the investigative service team, what efforts is GAO taking to better find and eliminate fraud at the federal level? The number that you gave from 2018 to 2022 is staggering.
Yes. One thing is to convince people of the scope of the problem. You know, we on the unemployment insurance program alone, we estimated between $100 billion and $135 billion of fraud during the pandemic. The Inspector General from SBA estimated about $200 billion in fraud in the PPP program and the EIDL program. But what I've got a number of legislative proposals that I've given the Congress. We worked with the Congress in 2015 to have a fraud prevention framework in place. So since 2016, agencies are supposed to have dedicated resources, do risk assessments, but they haven't done them. And so we need to do more in-depth work. For example,
How many haven't done them?
a couple of
Most
key
of them?
agencies, well, most of them, we've done we have 173 recommendations. We've looked at 40 different programs. But just to give you one example, SBA, the first fraud risk assessment they did was in February 2022, after all the money had been allocated. And so right now, I mean, there's not enough effort to prevent fraud, and that's the only effective way. You're going to catch some of these people. The fact that you're going to recover this money is, you know, not going to happen. At best, you'll get 10% back of what we've had. So we support the Inspector General from the unemployment insurance is trying to extend the statute of limitations to 10 years rather than 5. I support that. I'm trying to convince Congress to keep, there's an analytics center that's within the pandemic response accountability community made up of the IGs.
Right.
It's very effective, but it's going to go out of business soon. I think it ought to be permanent. I suggested this after the Recovery Act back in 2009. That operation was very effective in preventing fraud. It was supposed to be picked up potentially by Treasury. They didn't do it. I recommended Congress make it permanent. The Congress didn't act. So here we are 5 years later, trillions of dollars start
Right.
pouring out. It's not in place, and it got
Okay.
it got set
Thank
up
you.
later.
Thank you. Dr. Swagel, you talked about the cost estimates for nearly every bill that passes through the House or the Senate or in the committee when it comes out of committee and the workload that you have there. For calendar years 2024 and 2025, CBO estimates cost estimates that you're going to be conducting cost estimates for 900 authorizing bills each year. That's a 34% increase compared to 2023. How are you going to be able to absorb that increase in workload for cost estimates of authorizing bills? Can you tell us something about the efficiencies that your agency can deploy to improve the work product, the output without sacrificing the detail that you are able to include in that?
So that you've hit on my key goal is to have nearly every bill have a cost estimate published before it goes to the floor. You know, as soon as it comes out of committee, but before it goes to the floor of either chamber. We hit that 97% of the time. one of the key things we've done is to have more flexible staff, that we're hiring sometimes more generalists, where they tend to be younger staff, and we cross-train them across different areas. So instead of someone who's only looking at, like, unemployment insurance, like Gene just talked about, they'll be able to work on a portfolio of activities. And so, for example, on the Farm Bill, which has just been an all-hands-on-deck exercise, as you can imagine.
You're mentioning every committee that I'm on, so I'm
No,
I'm trying hard not to take this personally.
I wish
With
I was that.
appropriations, with armed services, and now the Farm Bill. I think you mentioned FAA too, so.
On the Farm Bill, that's just across the agency, and we're drawing in people. So that's really been the key for us, is maintaining the expertise, but being more flexible and hiring people in a way that's more flexible. So that's really a key initiative.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Dodaro, you're in the midst right now of a 5-year multi-phased effort to modernize the agency's internal information technologies, so the IT infrastructure that you have there. In FY25, you're requesting, I think, $3.75 million to build upon and continue that modernization effort. Hopefully, that's going to give us more predictable operating costs going forward. But given the nature of GAO's work, the agency, you have to have, first of all, effective but also secure IT systems. Can you give us an update on the status of that IT modernization effort, and specifically what projects the agency is undertaking to improve that infrastructure, please?
Yes. We're moving to more be cloud-based infrastructure. It'll give us more flexibility, predictability, and operating costs. We've moved many applications there already, such as our email systems and our internet website. But what we need to move there and modernize is our document management system. In other words, all the information we collect during an audit, and includes a lot of sensitive information as well, it has to be protected. That needs to be moved to the cloud, because the system we had was over 30 years old and it's outdated, as well. So that's one of the main things we need to do during this next year. We also are been moving to get all our reports published in the HTML format, so they're more easily searchable and accessible on any device. And so those are the two main projects that we're trying to complete during this period of time that'll give us, better service to our people. It'll make us more efficient because we can share the documentation. It'll be better able to protect it.
What reports are most searched for?
Oh.
What agency gets the most hits?
It depends. I'd have to check the records for it, but obviously defense. It'd be a safe bet to say defense is one of the top areas, because we do a lot of work in that area. Healthcare is very much searched, and we do a lot of work in that area. Almost everything. I mean, GAO is very well cited organization. I get a report every morning of all the broadcast media, the print media, blogs, and tweets where they cite GAO. GAO's work is cited to make sure it's accurate. And if it's not accurate, I try to get it correct as soon as possible. So every day there's probably about 50 or so different things in there. So and we push all our reports to different media groups. People sign up, that cover healthcare, defense, or whatever. They automatically get every report on that issue. We issue, last year was 670 some reports. And of course, we do a lot of testimonies, expert witnesses before committees as well, and it all gets covered.
Thank you. Thank
Sure.
you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Fisher. Dr. Swagel, you're an essential part of the legislative process. We can't move legislation without a score from CBO. And you have a well-deserved reputation for objectivity, thoroughness, and transparency in your work. My assumption would be that if there is budgetary pressure on GAO, something's got to give, and that probably would be the thoroughness or the accuracy of your work. So what's your sort of take on that?
as I said, my goal is what you need when you need it, and that's often a key balancing is how thorough against the time that we have. And if we, in some sense, didn't have the resources, didn't have the people, those trade-offs would be harder. I won't sacrifice the integrity and the quality, but it's just the comprehensiveness is where the trade-off would come.
Well, that'll impact our ability to function properly and thoroughly. And in every field, we see situations where our initial concept of the cost of a particular program is much less than what it turns out to be. And your guidance, as well as the Comptroller's guidance, helped us immensely. Mr. Halpern, you are working on your new system, the XPub system. So what's the status?
So the status is that we are, it's actually farther along than it ever has been. Just to give you a sense of what XPub will do and where it fits in the system, for roughly 4 decades, GPO has produced the software that allows Congress to print. So when you go to Ledge Council and they hit Control-P, it's our software that takes over. The current software, called Microcomp, was originally created when I was 12. And to say it's long in the tooth is an understatement. XPub is that program's replacement. The good news is that XPub for bills, resolutions, and amendments is at the stage where it's ready for testing. And we believe the House and Senate will begin that user acceptance testing very shortly. We are very optimistic for how that testing will go and its ability to function well in the Senate's IT environment. Once that is complete, then it will be up to the House and the Senate for when they decide to roll this out to replace Microcomp for bills, resolutions, and amendments. Once that happens, we think you'll see some improvements because XPub composes at least as fast, if not faster, than Microcomp. And the public will see benefits because our current terrible text-only display, and there's no other way to put it, will go away, and a new, modern, HTML-based display will take its place for new measures produced with XPub. Once that's complete, we'll start moving to reports and hearings and the Federal Register and the Congressional Record. But this bills, resolutions, and amendments is our first major milestone, and we are on track to meet that.
Thank you very much. Comptroller General, we've all, and you've all talked about the accelerating changes in technology, particularly AI, but we also have in the world of medicine RNA, which was the platform to produce the COVID vaccine. It seems every day something new is being discovered, et cetera. And how does your budget try to anticipate not just what we know now, but within weeks or days or months we'll discover?
Yes. Well, we do strategic planning to look on a horizon. We have a strategic foresight center with some futurists and experts. We've got a special panel on science, technology, and engineering that has all the presidents from the national academies on there, people from academia, the private sector. So we do a lot of thinking ahead. Like right now we're working on brain-computer interfaces, okay? And both has medical application for people with paralysis, either implantable or a sort of a headgear. But in defense, they're talking about developing technologies to be able to direct drones through thought waves, processes. Regenerative medicine, we've done a lot of work there. There's a lot of legal, ethical. So we're doing a lot of work on modeling for infectious diseases and things. So we're trying to anticipate. Quantum computing is another area where it will completely change encryption. I mean, it will just, so we try to think ahead. So we do these two-page, what we call spotlights on emerging technologies that are in the offing. Years ago, we did one on deep fakes, for example, and that's come to fruition. We started artificial intelligence back in 2018. We did 50 reports on artificial intelligence before it became, exploded on the national scene and captivated everybody's attention. And so we have a lot of advisors. I pay attention to the defense and intelligence community assessments that are made. So I very much think, we've got a good cadre of people now in that area. That's why I want to hang on to them and to continue to meet
And
those.
your analysis extends into classified material as well as unclassified?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Let me ask Dr. Swagel on any comment you have in this whole area of the new technology. And
We face the same challenge in some sense trying to be ready for legislation. In some sense, I want to get there with our analysis before you do, so that we're ready to support you on things like AI, whether it's the legislation or the effects of AI on the economy. It's something that we're looking at very carefully. It's a little early to say what the effect is on the overall economy, but we're following the literature. We're using it a little bit within CBO. We're converting one of our models from an old programming language to a newer one, from Fortran to Python. And there's AI tools that basically help with the translation. They don't do it for us, but they help.
Now, Fortran, that's a name that's from the past.
I learned Fortran in high school.
I learned BASIC at West Point, so I'm behind you or ahead of you, depending on the perspective. Senator Fisher, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Halpern, GPO is working with the executive branch, particularly OMB, to implement the Access to Congressionally Mandated Reports Act. And this law charged GPO with collecting and making publicly available congressionally mandated reports from federal agencies in one central online portal. And since our last hearing, I know that you've done significant work to implement that law. Is the executive branch proving to be a constructive partner in meeting the requirements of the law?
I think in general, the answer is yes. There are always going to be pockets of different agencies where complying with the requirements of the law may not be their highest priority at the moment. We are doing a lot of outreach to a variety of different agencies, and we are getting more and more agencies that are participating regularly. A good example is we're actually getting some assistance from the public as well. A good friend of mine who writes a transportation newsletter emailed me about 3 or 4 months ago and said, "Why isn't DOT submitting congressionally mandated reports?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. You should ask them." He did, and suddenly DOT started making sure that we were getting those documents. So we're working through a variety of different channels to make sure agencies understand their requirements under the law, and we're trying to make this as easy for them as possible. So we've been doing this for about a year. We have over 330 reports as of yesterday, and we're hoping that grows exponentially in the year to come.
To me, it wouldn't make a lot of sense if you would have to double check every agency. If you would have to go through what reports were required of that agency and then check up on them. So how you can't depend on your friend with the DOT reports all the time. So how do you address that? Just to send reminders out?
We send reminders. We work with our colleagues at OMB. OMB Director Young is an old friend and has been very supportive of our efforts here. And we think as as agencies get acclimated to this particular requirement, it's going to be easier for them to comply. Eventually, we would like to, frankly, be in the business of helping them comply with these kinds of rules by building systems that will enable us to easily get this data from them, both in a nice-looking PDF that looks great in print, but also in structured data that we can then make available through GovInfo for those folks who want that information that way.
I know that GPO is also working with the National Archives and Records Administration on the Center for Legislative Archives project, which will provide space for Congress's important records for the next 50 years. While Phase 1 of the project is complete, Phase 2 has not moved past the design stage. Can you give us an update on the Archives project, especially the current status of Phase 2, please?
Absolutely. So, as you mentioned, Phase 1 is up and operational and will give Congress probably decades of storage space. The goal is to get Phase 2, which will complete that 50-year storage requirement. Congress appropriated dollars for this project before the pandemic, and for a whole lot of reasons, the project didn't get launched before the pandemic hit. And we have been working basically since we came back from the pandemic to get that operational. We know that that project will now cost more than Congress previously appropriated for that. We are working very closely with the archives, and Dr. Shogun has been a great partner here in trying to get this project off the ground. Right now, we are working with the staff at the National Archives to establish a memorandum of agreement so that we can move forward in two parts for Phase 2. The first part, we are going to use the dollars that have already been appropriated to get as far as we possibly can. And we think that will be most of the build-out of the space. The second part of Phase 2 will be things like shelving and some of the environmental controls. And we'll have to work with the archives and Congress to get the funding that we need to finish building that out. We think we're very close. As I'm sure you can understand, there is sometimes some bureaucratic inertia that we have to overcome to get this done. But our primary mission is to support Congress, and this is just another aspect of that, and we will get this done.
Thank you. One last question,
Please,
Mr.
go ahead,
Chairman. Dr. Swagel, CBO's budget request highlights the agency's efforts to enhance transparency of its analysis and projections. In particular, the request notes that CBO will work to explain analytical methods and release data used in major reports. How do you plan to continue recent efforts to promote that transparency in CBO's work products, and how will the FY25 request build on those existing efforts?
No, thank you. It's a key priority for the agency, and we've been working on it, and we'll continue to work on it in a variety of ways. So some of it will be publishing reports, looking at our models and explaining them, and then interacting with outside groups. As an example, our work on drug price negotiation, we published an initial report and then did some presentations. Industry groups came to us and said, they basically said, you're missing things on how drug development is financed. We said, you're right. We changed the methodology. We went back to them. They're not going to say, oh, yeah, it's fine, but we're trying to be responsive. So that's one group. Another group of efforts is posting data and then posting parts of our models, essentially code snippets. And we're trying to do the data in a way that's as flexible as possible, so outside groups can manipulate it in a good way and tell the story that they want to tell. I'll just give you one example, then I'll stop. We have an annual series on income distribution that is started by Senator Baucus and now continued by Senator Wyden, has directed us to do this. And we publish the data that goes into that in a spreadsheet, and then others will use it and have given us feedback, and we've taken that on board, and in some senses we publish more data because of that feedback.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you, Senator Fisher. Gentlemen, thank you for your excellent testimony. As we understand, we'll take all your advice into consideration, and we have a challenging budget ahead of us, both Senator Fisher and I, but your service is essential to our operation and to the operation of the government. You do it well, and once again, would you please thank all of the men and women who make it happen. With that, unless you have a comment, I would adjourn the hearing. The hearing is adjourned.